Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm taking as my centerpiece the full moon in Taurus on November the 15th, and I'm going to be looking at what else is going on at this time in this first half of, well, actually more than the first half of November. On this video, I'm then going to look at it sign by sign. So you'll have a very personal view, not just of the full moon, but also all the other really important things that are going to that are happening. So it gives you a kind of round view. As you know, I do another video each month, and that is more directed towards mundane astrology. So we look at what these configurations mean in the world. But I still think it's important just to set everything in its place, even with this one. And of course, I'm recording this on the 28th of October, so it's a week before the American election, and the American election has been quite a subject of interest worldwide, and certainly with astrologers, including myself. And you may say, oh, I'm so fed up of hearing about America. Why can't we talk about something else? And the problem is, of course, that what happens in America doesn't stay in America. It affects the whole world. And this election is particularly important. So my video that you're looking at right now is set to come out just before that election. But I'm not going to talk about it on this one because I've got other videos where I have looked at Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, and the whole signs for the election day itself. So you can look at my previous video for that. What I'm going to concentrate on really is all the other meanings of these configurations that we've got going for us. And it's really, really powerful. I mean, this full moon taking place on the 15th of November. And as you'll see, when I put the chart up, I've set it for London. But of course, wherever you are in the world, it's going to be at a different time if you're in Sydney or if you're in Los Angeles. But just take the time zone difference and you'll be able to figure out when that full moon happens. It's not a supermoon. But as I say, it is super fascinating because it is conjunct the planet Uranus. And the planet Uranus is nothing if not diverse, unusual, the unexpected, the controversial. That's all Uranus for us. And that is closely conjunct the full moon as well, not just 5 degrees away or something. So it's very much part of the full moon story. This full moon, as I said, not a supermoon. But it does have a lot of names attached to it, all by the Native Americans. And the one I really, really love is the one that says it's the moon of much white frost on grass. A rather long-winded title, but you get the drift. This is a time at which things are really beginning to crisp up for winter. And with the sun in Scorpio, the sun in the 8th house of the horoscope, the solar chart, the idea of hunkering down, of getting deep below the surface is very apposite, really, when you think of that name. But the idea of the frost gives it a kind of sparkling effect as well. Full moon in Taurus, just what are we thinking about when we think about that full moon? Well, Taurus, the second sign of the zodiac, it comes in at the time that spring is in full bloom. And the sign has a lot to do with blooms, has a lot to do with gardening and with agriculture and with the fruits of the earth. And I sometimes think that weight card, tarot card of the Empress, which is so Taurian, gives us a real picture of Taurus in the sense that it's the archetype of the earth goddess. So we see that fecundity. We see also the nurture. And in some ways, while we associate Cancer with the idea of babies and motherhood and pregnancy, Taurus really is also about fertilization and about growth and development. And there is a real nurturing aspect of Taurus as a sign. So with the moon in Taurus, I think it is a time to nurture things. And one of the things that I think is quite a good idea, you know how I like to do things in real life, in the material world, because that sends a message to the psyche and the spirit, because they're connected. And one of the things you can do on this full moon in Taurus is plant a seed. Whether you put that seed in a little pot and keep it on your windowsill, in the kitchen, wherever you do it, as you nurture it and it grows, it gives you a great feeling of being alive. And it's also sending a message to the psyche that if you can grow from this seed, other things from seeds can grow. So it encourages growth. Another point about Taurus, a lot of nurses born under the sign of Taurus or with Taurus in their charts. And I think that too, the healing, nurturing aspect of Taurus coming through there. But yes, we do think about Taurus and the economy and money, things to do with the fruits of the earth, but also the fruits of life, the pleasures of life, can be a little indulgent. So maybe at the full moon, we can have a little moment of indulgence to remind ourselves that life is good, life is beautiful. And isn't that a nice thing to think about? With so much conflict in the world, how nice to think life is beautiful. And that's the beautiful thought we should have at this time on the full moon. And of course, I'm going to be taking you through that sign by sign any moment now. Now, the other thing I wanted to do, and in fact, I always forget to do this, and I'm always reminded by people, why don't you talk about the things that are going on, whether it's with my work, whether it's with the website or whatever it is. But I think the thing I want to really talk about a little bit is, especially if you're new to my channel, I really appreciate the subscriptions because it grows the channel. And it's important to grow a channel, just like it is to grow something from a seed. Okay, so that's something I should put in, is on my list of notes. Now, the other thing that I thought I would do on this video is talk about some other aspects of astrology, because I get emails from you, and funnily enough, these last week or so, I've had about 3 or 4 emails asking me about retrograde planets and how they should treat them and what does it mean. And this is a very interesting subject. And when we think about retrogradation, the first thing to get under our belts is that it isn't the planet that's turning retrograde. It's not as though it comes to a halt and then goes into reverse. It's to do with our perception of that planet. It's viewed from Earth, from us. It looks like that's what is happening. The analogy we can use is the idea of being on a train and you're going fast and you're passing another train on parallel tracks, which is going slower than you. And it sort of looks for a moment as though that's going backwards and you're going forwards. And that's what's happening when we find out that a planet is retrograde. It's the relative speeds of the planet's Earth that gives that effect. Now, the outer planets spend 5 months of most years, in retrograde. So it's not very unusual. In fact, if you haven't got an outer planet in retrograde, that is, well, is it more unusual? Well, what I'm saying is it's commonplace. It's not a big thing. Now, when it comes to having Mars retrograde, Mars goes into retrograde every 26 months or so. Venus every 18 months. And Mercury goes into retrograde 3 or 4 times a year. So the personal planets here, we do see more of more times, the time between them, if you like, it's a different experience. And anything that's to do with a personal planet is a little bit more personal. We have more of a direct connection with it. However, that being said, think about it, it's our response to the planet, because the planet itself isn't going retrograde. It's viewed from Earth, from our perception. So the planet hasn't changed. It's something in our perception of it that has changed. So another way I describe retrogradation is Well, we think about a chicken that we might decide, to marinate. We put all sorts of herbs and spices on it, and we'll give it a little bit of time so that the flavors can get into the chicken. But it's still a chicken. And that's the thing we need to take away from the idea of retrogradation. There isn't suddenly a whole new meaning for that planet because it's turned retrograde. Neptune is still Neptune, regardless of whether it's retrograde or direct. And it's our perception of it and our response to it that is different. And I have a retrograde Mercury, and I talk about this all the time. And I always hear in my head that sort of sound, I was born under a retrograde Mercury. And it hasn't stopped me from writing, from broadcasting, from doing videos, from consulting, from being very much out there with my ideas and my theories, if you like. What I am very good at is research, and what I do a lot of is research. And is that a response to retrograde Mercury? Yes, well, maybe it is. But on the other hand, my Mercury natally is in the 6th house. And the 6th house, ruled by Virgo, is all about analysis and breaking the things down to their component parts. So there we are. But my intention here is just to say, really don't get too contorted about it. Treat it as your response to it. So you put yourself in the driver's seat and analyze your response to the themes and the positions, if you like, of where that retrograde planet is in your natal chart. When a planet does turn retrograde, or it turns direct and it's stationary, that period of time, which can be 5 days before, 5 days after, on average, let's take a 5-day period, a 10-day period before and after, then that planet's properties are super powerful. And we tend to have events that are related to that planet, and maybe too, if it's affecting our chart, what's going on in our chart, it tends to be super intense. So that's something else we can take away from it. And sometimes we will find, as we will when we look at the chart, because Saturn is turning stationary direct on the same day that there is a full moon, we can see that matters affecting the constitution, affecting rulership, governance, the economy even, are going to be really pretty important at that time. So I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get on with looking at this chart and taking you through all the things that are happening around the time of the full moon. Here we go. I'm going to put my glasses on while I look at this, and you're probably seeing what I'm looking at, although until I put my glasses on, it's kind of blurry. So there is our full moon at the 12 o'clock position, the moon, and the sun at the 6 o'clock position. And what we can also see is the proximity of Uranus to that moon, Uranus being 25 of Taurus, the moon being 24. And you will see that I've drawn some lines between Neptune, which is in the 2 o'clock position, Pluto, which is in the just past 3 o'clock position, and of course back we come to the sun here at 24 degrees of Scorpio. Anything that's going to be around 25 degrees of the zodiac is going to resonate with this full moon and its conjunction to Uranus, and we get a configuration. In this way, we've got with the Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the sun and the moon, we get a sort of mini grand trine. It's also called a small talent triangle, but you will never get me calling it a small talent triangle. I don't know who invented that. I think a mini grand trine will suffice us. Although I was playing around with the idea of other names we could call it, which I may enlighten you with at some point in the future. But if we look at Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, these are the 3 outer planets discovered in the past 200 years. And we think, well, 1781 was Uranus, 1846 was Neptune, 1930 was Pluto. It's been since this time that technology, industry, the modern era really has flourished and developed. And I came across a very interesting fact not so very long ago, and I wrote about it in one of my Friday Bites. And that was uranium was discovered about seven years after Uranus was discovered, and was called uranium because of the discovery of the planet Uranus. And when we think about these three outer planets, they're all components of the nuclear industry, nuclear power, splitting the atom, all that energy. We've got uranium from Uranus, we've got plutonium from Pluto, and we've got neptunium from Neptune. So these three particular outer planets are components of our brave new age, and they have a particular association with the nuclear world. And right now, and into next year as well, they are connected, Uranus to Neptune to Pluto. We've got the triad. I think I called it an unholy trio in my Friday Bite. But we have had a lot more awareness of nuclear power in the last year or so. We've had Putin throwing around threats of retaliation with nuclear weapons. We've had the fear that nuclear facilities in Ukraine would be affected, damaged by firepower. So, there has been a lot of this kind of awareness that we, are in a nuclear age, and what does this mean for us? Now, we look at a full moon like this, and it brings out that theme. And I'm not saying, for heaven's sake, I'm not saying, a nuclear weapon will be exploded. I'm not saying that at all. But I am looking at the fact that it's the whole concept of nuclear power, whether it's the good developments that a nuclear power brings us in the way of heat and energy. We're also looking at the potential for what that means in terms of treaties. And it's in the atmosphere, so to speak, and we've got the moon conjunct Uranus. So the whole idea of all of that I've just talked about may be very present at this particular time. So the other thing about the full moon, and I'm going to talk about this sign by sign, but it's almost as though the idea of closure and completion, which are always full moon themes, so whatever comes to an end, is influenced by Uranus. So it may be sudden, unexpected, unusual, and controversial. And, although the full moon cycle lasts for another couple of weeks until the new moon, the day, obviously, with this moon conjunct Uranus is going to be, it's going to bring us a surprise of some sort. And if we go back to August the 19th, where there was a full moon at 27 degrees of Leo Aquarius, Uranus was exactly intersecting that full moon at 27 degrees of Taurus. And there was a lot going on at that time. It was the time of the Democratic Convention. There were all sorts of things going on in the world. But I remember on the exact day, there was a waterspout in Sicily where this great and beautiful high-masted yacht was in port, and it struck it, and there was, it went to the bottom of the ocean there. And that is a real Uranus moment, isn't it? When you think about that, out of the blue, a waterspout. And the image of that is a kind of image that goes with Moon, Uranus combinations. And of course, we've got Neptune, water tied in here, explosions, there was a fire, all of it is in there. So we sometimes have to be versatile with our astrology because it isn't a set piece that we can just draw out and say this will happen. But we certainly have the guiding principles of what we're dealing with. And so we know at this time, and especially as it comes 10 days after the American election, that this is going to be a really, really important part of that election story. And as I go on looking at this particular chart, you'll see that I've drawn in red a triangle, which is between Mercury opposing Jupiter, squaring Saturn. So we've got Jupiter at 11 o'clock, Mercury at 5 o'clock, and Saturn at 2 o'clock. And the thing about this is that Saturn tends to consolidate. It tends to, say this is the way it is. It's a planet of reality. It's also got to do with time and timing, karma as well. So the Mercury Jupiter, which is about communication, it's about travel, it's about things going on in the world that are stories, big stories, all sorts of great news. And we have Saturn intersecting that. And there is a sort of sense here that reality is coming to bear. And I think in particular, relation with the election, if you like. I also think that because Jupiter is squaring Saturn, that was also on August the 19th, and we're going to have it exact again in December and then in June of next year, that this has a lot to do with the economy. And I think this particular configuration coming at this time may have something to do with what's going on in certainly the American economy, but within other economies, because what happens in America doesn't stay in America. So we're looking here at perhaps an effect, a sort of global upturn or something entirely in the reverse. But what we see is that Saturn coming in, consolidating that. It's also got something to do with constitutional matters and to do with the rule of law. So do we see Saturn coming in and establishing the rule of law? Yes, I think so. I think that's what this means. Or does it mean that something that we were all hoping for and hoping was good news turns into something that isn't really good news because Saturn has stuck his oar in it? But it is going to be important, this T-square configuration, coming as it does, 10 days after the election, we get some kind of consolidation here and maybe some surprises and upsets because of the full moon and all the rest of it. Another configuration that I've outlined here is the opposition between Mars and Pluto. Now, Mars and Pluto are going to be in orb. Really, it's going to be around until the 3rd of January. And then it will, go out of orb, but then come back again in early April. So think about how long we've got with Mars in orb of Pluto, and it has been applying over the past 10 days or so, not a little bit longer. Mars and Pluto together are quite confrontational, but I use the word confrontation in a positive way, in that when we confront something in its reality, we can move forward from there. So confrontation can be good, and you get confrontation with Mars and Pluto. But of course, you can also get confrontation in the sense of war and conflict and upset. And this is why at this time we've got so much going on, so many fears being raised about, is a war going to escalate? Is something terrible going to happen that's going to just make everything go, off, it's completely off the scale. And it does present that possibility. But I think also Mars and Pluto is about regeneration. There's active regeneration. So things are being brought out of rubble. So we've got growth out of rubble, which is a good image to have, isn't it? When we think of Palestine, growth out of rubble. But we may also want to look individually at this idea of refashioning with Pluto. We talk about death and rebirth. We talk about elimination and creation, the creator-destroyer principle with Pluto. But increasingly, I'm coming to think that if we focus on this word refashioning, we get more of a kind of positive image out of this Mars-Pluto opposition, so that even if something is stripped away and stripped to its bare bones, we can take something out of it and build it into something new. And often from the very smallest, tiniest thing, great big things grow. And I think that is a real message coming forth, really, on that Mars-Pluto opposition. Just to give you a few dates so that you can bear this in mind, the exact Mars-Pluto opposition happens on the 3rd of November. So that's a couple of days before the American election, and Venus opposed Jupiter, or opposes Jupiter, if you're watching it before, it is also in there. Venus opposition Jupiter. So you get Venus opposition Jupiter square Saturn. Mercury is exactly square Saturn on the 12th of November. The full moon on the 15th, with Saturn turning stationary direct, which is another reason that T-square involving Saturn is so powerful and so likely to have an effect constitutionally. There'll be all sorts of things in all sorts of countries where the constitution is being looked at and changed in some cases. And if we come back, let's have another look at Pluto again. What is very interesting about Pluto is that the United States was born with Pluto at 26 degrees, 27 degrees of Capricorn. So it's only a couple of degrees away from this. It's had its Pluto return, but Pluto is still in the process of returning and going up to a new level. And we can see that in 1776, when America came, we had the Declaration of Independence, July the 4th. A matter of months later, Pluto into Aquarius. So this was the time when all things Aquarian and the effects of Pluto in Aquarius were starting to be felt. A new world, literally a new world. And it's happening again for a second time. And again, America is in the midst of all this because it is reinventing itself. It is refashioning itself. And what's going to come out of this Pluto into Aquarius that follows is a new era for America, a new American world. And so we need to think in those terms without getting caught up in what kind of world is it. Just let's talk about a new world. Other things I need to mention. Well, yes, give you the date here, really. Sun opposition Uranus, the 17th of November. Mercury opposition Jupiter, the 18th of November. And Tuesday, the 19th of November, Pluto returning to Aquarius. Remember, it's been in and out of Aquarius over the last 18 months, and it's now beginning its full 20-year journey through Aquarius. So we're getting this very, very big resonance with notching it up a bit. You're never going to repeat history with Pluto in Aquarius, but there are resonances and references to what was going on at that time. And of course, there were lots of other revolutions going on, French Revolution, Industrial Revolution, all of it going on. So we were in a time of revolution over 200 and so years ago. Equally, now all countries are in the process of revolution, with all sorts of governments being replaced by left wing, right wing. The whole centrist idea seems to have or be in the process of fading, and we're getting extremes of one sort or another. And I think this too is to do with the extreme nature of Aquarius. It's a fixed sign, a sign of extremes. But I said that I wouldn't go on and on about mundane astrology, and especially not America. And so what I'm going to do is get straight into the sign by sign of this full moon. Before I head in there, I just want to remind everybody that I take it from the sun sign perspective. So if you know what sun sign you are, then you go and watch that particular segment. But if you know that you have a certain sign rising, which matches obviously where the full moon is, then head to that sign as well. You'll get two different interpretations, but both will have an impact. They're true in both ways. As we all know, we have different things going on in our lives. We don't have just one story. We have lots of things in different parts of our lives. So you can look at both of them. Both will be valid. So let's begin with Taurus, because the full moon is in Taurus. And we can see when we look at the horoscope here that the moon is in your sign, in the first house here, and the sun is the opposite point in the seventh house. So the first thing that we look at is the idea of relationships. The first house is the me, if you like. The seventh house is the we. So it's all about us in relation to other people. So Taurus, this is a time, and remember, the moon is only in Taurus for 3 days. The full moon only really, if you like, in orb, in aspect, for about half a day, if you like. So the full moon itself makes things stronger and bigger. And of course, the theme that we've got with the full moon, closure and completion, is going to be at its maximum effect around the time of the full moon, as well as the Uranus effect, which says unexpected endings, unexpected things happening that sort of mark either a change of direction of a situation, an awakening in you or awakenings in other people, and that therefore changes the direction of a certain situation. Now, the moon in your sign really brings out your inner world, Taurus. So it's not so much things that are, that you might choose to do and might be in the realm of what we might call conscious actions. It's more about your inner person, your inner self, and you are much more likely to be prompted by your feelings and emotions at this time, and that things will come to you in waves that not necessarily overwhelm you, but it's almost as though you're hearing your inner voice and you are responding in that instinctive self way to whatever is going on at the time. Now, there is a sense of completion here because it's a full moon, and because the sun is in the opposite sign and we're looking at the relationship axis, it could be that you are about to sign up to something, whether you're going to sign a contract with a company, whether you are going to join forces in business, or whether you're going to marry, or you're going to move in with your significant other. It's a done deal. But we can also have a done deal in the sense that something is done and dusted. So this full moon can also preside over the end of a relationship. Whether the contract is up, that was always what it was meant to be, that was what you expected, or whether something happens and it brings an end to what was once some kind of commitment or a relationship. Remember, Uranus is in that mix, so it suggests there's something sudden about this. And I think especially if you have a mid-May birthday, then this full moon is close to your sun, and you're much more likely to either be awoken to something that makes for big changes because you're now awoken, or it can be the reverse and something happens and changes it all for you. It is both a time to make the ties that bind and also a time to sever them. But of course, there are other things going on in this chart. The red triangle is linking Jupiter, Mercury, and Saturn. And if you remember in the overview, I was talking about constitutional matters, things to do with the economy. And in fact, when we look at your chart, we've got Mercury and Jupiter on the axis of finance and self-worth, and Saturn intersecting that from the 11th house position. So there is a sense here of a financial matter whether you are signing on the dotted line or you have reached a point where something can't go on anymore. And that's really reinforcing the message of the full moon. But now, more specifically, in relationship with money and also with some kind of a collaboration or a project or something that you're working on. And remember, Saturn can consolidate and make it real and permanent. And it can also coincide with the fact that something can't go on anymore because it's out of control. Jupiter making things go too far and needs to be brought into check. We've also got that Mars-Pluto opposition, and it will be particularly noticeable if you've got an April birthday, especially a birthday around the 21st, 22nd of April. And the Mars-Pluto effect I have talked about on the overview, that idea of, a challenge in a way and confrontation, being both looking at something in its reality and dealing with it, but also confrontation in the sense of argument and conflict. They're both there. But we also need to look at regeneration. If something is ending at this time, what can you take away from that and put it into something else that creates something new, but still with the essence of what it was. And that might be something to think about, Taurus, at this particular time. If we come to Gemini, we can see that the Moon and Uranus are together in the 12th house of the horoscope, with the Sun at the opposite point in the 6th house. Now, the 6th and 12th houses, like the 9th and 3rd houses, are what I call the seeking houses. We're always seeking something in these 4 houses. And in the case of the 6th and the 12th, we're seeking purpose. What is our life purpose? What is our spiritual purpose? That's a 6th, 12th issue. So we put the full moon there, and it probably means there's either an awakening or an understanding of the spiritual reason behind something, or you get, or maybe both, the idea that you have a purpose and you are aware what that purpose is now. And almost always with 6th house matters, we're looking at service, aren't we? We're looking at the service to others. We're looking at our job or what we do as a sense of service. And we look at the 12th house and we think that if we are to access the higher realms, so to speak, of the spirit, then we serve the spirit. So this whole 6-12 axis is fundamentally about spirit and life purpose. That's what it's about in its great big sense. If we look at it on a more mundane sense, it's about health and work. So it says here that there is a change. This can be anything from a change of workplace, so you're moving to a different place, to a change in personnel, people you're working with, change of brief, you've got new things, something's come to an end, you don't do that anymore, to the whole idea that work has come to an end. Maybe you're retiring, or maybe a job is over. And remember, with that Moon conjunct Uranus, it's a bit unexpected. You didn't think things would turn out quite like this. But of course, whatever Uranus is bringing an end to serves a purpose, because diversification is what is necessary. You've got to diversify. You've got to channel your energies, talents, interest in new directions. You can't go on in the same old way. Health matters here are interesting, either playing around with 2 things. Either there is the realization of a condition that you didn't know you had, and thinking, oh, well, I better get this seen to. Or we could look at a treatment coming in for a condition that is going to resolve it, because remember, breakthroughs are as much a part of Uranus aspects as they are of awakenings. I think at the time of the full moon, it would be a good idea to be restful. So on the 15th, try not to cram your diary full of things, because remember, the moon is conjunct Uranus, and it won't take much to press your buttons or for you to press someone else's buttons. So be aware of that. You're also looking at that red triangle there, which is Jupiter in your sign, opposition Mercury in Sagittarius, squaring Saturn. Again, this is what I've discussed in the overview in regard principally to the American, I nearly said revolution, but what I meant was the American election, in that I think a lot of things legally and constitutionally are being dealt with at this particular time, hopefully with a good outcome, a good solid outcome, because Saturn is very solid. And you may find that that applies in your own life as well, whether you've got something legal going on. And what happens at this time is that it's all sort of resolved. You've got it all happening. On the other hand, it could be that something is just not realizable. You've had a lot of energy put into something. Maybe it's to do with another person. It's a partnership issue. And actually you've realized that this isn't going to work at all. But Saturn is giving you that result. And when you've got a result like that, then at least you know you need to plow your energies in new directions, or you need to radically redraw whatever it was. I think on the whole, with Jupiter in your first house, Gemini, or in your sign, there's a lot of sense of clouds having silver linings. So if you are up against it at this time of the full moon and you are a little bit disappointed with the way things are turning out, there's a good reason. Something good is going to come out of all of that. The Mars-Pluto opposition is only really going to have an impact on you if you've got something at 29 degrees of the cardinal signs, or 0 to 1, 2 degrees of the fixed signs, Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, or Scorpio. But if you are right now in turmoil, something going on that it appears to you that a whole part of existence is ending and maybe it's not very comfortable, let's get back to that other word about Pluto, refashioning, that I talked about. The idea that you can take something away from this situation that is no longer any use. It's a little bit like stripping a plant back or a tree. You're encouraging growth, but you're still on the same tree. So something out of what's been can now become something else. And I think if you look at it like that, it turns something that's perhaps quite overwhelming to experience into something that's very positive. So now let's come to Cancer. And when we look at the horoscope here, Cancer rising, Sun Cancer, you can see that the Moon conjunct Uranus, opposition the Sun, our full moon conjunct Uranus, is cutting across the 5th and 11th houses. Now, this is the axis of creativity. It marks the end of a gestation period. Now, of course, it's easy to understand. When we talk about gestation, we think about babies, don't we? 9 months in the womb and then a delivery at the end of it. But there are lots of gestation periods when we're putting something together, when we have a project, whether it's a business project, whether it's very personal, whatever it is, something that has been 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, or 1 year in embryo is ready to be born. And because the moon is in conjunct Uranus, it's an unexpected result. You didn't expect this part of it at all. You knew you'd done all the work, or you knew you'd been preparing for this, but when it comes out, it's different. Now, collaboration is in here as well. And I think the idea of pooling resources, whether those are intellectual resources, financial resources, whatever they may be, is also part and parcel of this full moon story. So it may be that something you've been putting together with a whole group of people is now complete, and it's good. You've done it. It's a great achievement. I also want to go back and think about this idea of gestation and babies. Now, the 11th house, the 5th house, the 2nd house, and the 8th house are what I call the houses of survival. And aside from the fact we need money to put a roof over our head, 2nd, 8th house financial aspect of things, in order for the human race to survive, we've got to come together, and that's the whole 11th house collaboration humanitarian theme. But when we look at it in the 5th house, then we're thinking about, we're also ensuring the continuation of humanity by producing a baby. And how do we produce babies? Well, we get together with someone. That's how it happens. And so romance and love affairs, affairs of the heart, are also involved with this full moon. So maybe a love affair has come to a point where you're ready to turn it into something more permanent, or maybe it's the other way around and it's gone as far as it can. Remember, you're at the end of a gestation period and everything changes thereafter. But there is an element of surprise there. We're also looking at that big triangle, and we're looking at Jupiter opposing Mercury, squaring Saturn. And I talked about this in the overview and aligned it with what may be happening, not just all over the world, but particularly in America, with constitutional matters, legal matters, big economic matters. And of course, that spreads out, and I'm not going to go into it in those terms, but this is happening in your chart as well. And we're looking at the areas of your chart which are concerned with seeking something. You're seeking to find something. And so we get the idea with Mercury opposition Jupiter square Saturn that you found it. There's a result. You've got somewhere. Now, whether you're idyllically happy with that result or not at all is going to vary from Cancerian to Cancerian, but that's the theme that we're looking at here. I mean, Saturn has a long way to go, really, through Pisces, another year or so. And what Saturn has been encouraging you to do is to get qualifications, to get something established in the sense of, you know, what you know about the world, what you want to have in your world. And it can have to do with knowledge, experience, and skills. And it can also have to do with traveling and different places in the world as well. So Saturn is encouraging you to get something solid in place. And with Mercury opposition Jupiter right now, maybe that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that you've got something done. Mars and Pluto, Mars in Leo, Pluto in Capricorn, your opposite sign, about to go into Aquarius on the 19th, a few days after this full moon, is continuing that Plutonic story, particularly for those of you who are born at the end of your sign. So we're looking at the 18th, 19th, 20th of July, or if you've got planets and points around 29 degrees Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, or 0 degrees of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Those are the sensitive areas. And as I said in the overview, Mars and Pluto are about confrontation, whether it is looking at that elephant in the living room and dealing with it, or whether it does mean conflict. But out of conflict comes, come new things when it's done with. Sometimes there has to be conflict. And I'm looking increasingly at Pluto as the idea of that we bring something out of that situation. We take something away from it, and it's that seed which will grow into something else. And when you look at it like that, it makes up, or it helps us cope with a situation that might be really difficult. We see it as productive and enhancing, as opposed to being something that is about loss and can't go there anymore. It's taking away something from it and growing it into a new thing. Leo Now, when you see this horoscope, you see so clearly the drama of that Mars-Pluto opposition from your sign to the opposite sign. The full moon itself is going from the 4th house to the 10th house, the axis of life direction. So we can really see that this point in 2024 is a critical point. It is a point where things take off, or it is a point where things end, but actually even an ending gives birth to a new beginning at some point. So if we look at this full moon and we see the moon-Uranus conjunction up there at the 10th house, but the sun at the opposite point, and we're looking at things to do with the home and family, the roots of life, but also the foundations of the future, things to do with your job, to do with your material world, to do with your being out there in the world. So we could be looking at a conflict here. And this is a conflict lots of us have in life, and we're likely to become aware of it on a full moon like this. That either we're spending too much time out there doing stuff, focusing on work and all those things that take us away from home and family, and realizing to our cost that that's not a good thing. And it's the same really as running away from ourselves, never ever coming to our inner sanctum, the sanctuary of ourselves. If we spend too much time being and doing out there, we're not nurturing our being. And so this full moon is a crisis of that. And the purpose of that crisis is to get back in balance, because things, life-work balance, but also this business of doing things and not doing things. It's a bit simplified, but I think you'll probably get my drift. Now, it could be that there is unexpected news regarding your job, and that either there are just changes and you're thinking, oh, how am I going to adapt to that? Not sure I like it. Or it could be the end of a job. On the other hand, we could look at it in reverse and see that maybe you're going to move home, or there is something else about the home that is now changing. There's something going on there, whether it's with the family or with the home itself. And it's going to amount to a change, especially as Mars and Pluto is in opposition. So that's saying, goodness, here is a new era coming about, and this full moon is triggering it. With Mars in your sign, you're the one in the driver's seat. Pluto's at the opposite point. So it may seem as though people are blocking you, or you can't get where you want to go because there is something that won't move. That's very typical of a Mars-Pluto opposition. The thing is, really, you can go on banging your head against a brick wall if you really want, but you're only going to end up with a headache. And probably what I'm going to recommend is that take a step back at this point and wait and see how things unfold. You release the reins and just allow things to evolve. That way, that's going to be much more helpful. And looking at that in connection with the Mercury-Jupiter opposition squaring Saturn, that red triangle, that T-square, which is also showing that it is possible right now that something great and good is growing, something that you're setting in motion can be established. Saturn will establish it. But on the other hand, if you really are going up in the wrong direction, or something is completely out of control, then Saturn is going to come along and point that out to you so that something cannot go any further. It's just not going to work, let's put it that way. In my overview, I talked about this T-square in connection, particularly with America, in the sense of the constitutional issues being dealt with, the economy, the government, all of that. And on the one hand, this showing that there is now consolidation, something can be set in stone. But also because we've got everything else going on here, there is controversy, there is conflict. And that's the kind of picture that we're getting from all of this. But let's come back to the keynote here. And it comes back to Pluto. Pluto in your opposite sign. Yes, this may be a period where you think that everything has fallen apart, or not everything, but just one thing, and that one thing is big enough to make it feel like everything, that you are going to get something out of that, out of that, some nucleus, some tiny part of it is going to grow into something else. And I think if you can have that way of looking at it, it's very positive. And I think particularly with a relationship, and sometimes I think when a relationship goes sour and it can't go anymore, we think, oh, I've lost everything, and we may be heartbroken, or we're angry, you know, whatever it may be. We forget that relationship, all the energy and the love that we put into it, it hasn't gone. It's gone into the bigger universe, if you like, to grow into new relationships. Even if you don't want to hear that right now, that's what's happening. Okay, Leo? So now let's come to Virgo. And when we look at where the full moon is for you, Virgo, we've got the sun in the 3rd house and the moon Uranus conjunction opposite it in the 9th house. So we're in the whole area of journeys. And I talked about closure and completion with a full moon, because that is if you only have one word to describe a full moon and its effect, we would be saying closure and completion. So we think about the end of a journey. Now, maybe you know exactly what this means, because around this time, you will be coming back from a trip, or you will be going on a journey, and presumably as you travel, you will get somewhere. And we can easily translate this with Uranus there as saying, oh yes, when you get to the end of your journey, there's a surprise waiting. Or the journey itself will be surprising. So we're playing with those themes. But of course, we can have a journey of the mind. We can have a journey in experience and knowledge. So this is a time when we may be getting some really, really important information in, so that you will say, wow, that piece of information has really changed my opinion of that person or that thing. And it may mean that you want to change direction. When we talk about outlook, we think about that literally. If you are looking out of a window, that's your outlook. What's going on outside the window is your outlook. But also, our outlook is how we view the world and our situations. Something can fundamentally change your outlook at this time, whether we take it literally and you're going to be looking at life through a new window, or we're talking figuratively and we're thinking that something is changing your whole outlook, and it's a good thing. And I think when we embrace Uranus and say, all right, so I've had to change my mind, or I can't do that thing, I've got to do something else. The sooner we embrace that and don't keep thinking about what we can't do anymore or what we haven't got anymore, is the sooner we start to find and discover the great things about it. I mean, there is something to do with liberation in this full moon, that either you are liberated from a situation or you gain a sense of liberation from what you're doing. And I think that's incredibly powerful. Yeah, something may come to an end abruptly, but you know what? It's going to release you for something else. Now, the Mars-Pluto opposition, this is going from a sort of 6th, 12th axis. And unless you have planets and points at 29 degrees of the cardinal signs or 0 degrees of the fixed signs, it's not going to affect you. However, if you're listening to me and you would like to say to me, my life is so screwed up at the moment, you have no idea, things just aren't working, I can't move this situation, things have gone pear-shaped here, and I literally don't know what to do. Well, that is often a response to a Pluto transit. It's almost as though we have no control over what's happened to us in our lives. It's got nothing to do with us. We can see that it's fate, it's circumstance, it's the government, but what it is not us. But it is in dealing with that. And, you know, I've said this to many signs, and I said it in the overview, this idea of looking at a Pluto transit as refashioning something. There is that idea, especially with the word refashion, that you're taking something and making it look different. But the essential seed of it is in there. And so you will be able to take away from what is gone or causing whatever it may be, whatever the actual scenario is, there will be something you will take away from that and grow into something else. That's very, very positive. Now, Virgo, we also look at that red triangle, which is Mercury opposing Jupiter, squaring Saturn. And this is in your angular houses, 4th, 7th, and 10th. So we're looking at relationships. We're looking at Saturn as being a figure. Is it that somebody has got in the way of your plans? So somebody has blocked you? Or is it that somebody in Saturn's guise, and this time this is not exactly an avatar, but a guru figure, a teacher, somebody who is mature and wise, has come along and said, look, I can help you get this. I can help you achieve this ambition. I can help grow this. I can help put this right. And it may be that someone you meet now is someone that you can form an alliance with. But it is equally the case that somebody you have an alliance with is now getting in your way. So we're looking at those different possibilities. But as I said, let's go back to the idea of growth and awakening and release and refashioning. These are words you need to play around with in this period of 2024. Libra. Well, your full moon experience is a second 8th house experience. So we are in the whole area of finances and self-worth. So there's a range of possibilities here, but because Uranus is in the mix, we get the idea that this is not what you expected. This is something unusual. Do you come into money unexpectedly? Wow, who'd have thunk it? Never thought that would happen. Do you win something, or do you inherit something? Or is someone settling with you? Well, that can happen on this kind of setup. But we must also look at the idea that the full moon brings things to a head. And is this bringing a financial situation to a head? Have you got a bit of a financial crisis on your hands? If so, it's a good thing it comes to a head, because once it does, you can take steps to change things for the better. It may be a bit of a financial headache at this time. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. It can just be something you didn't expect, and now you've got to twist yourself into knots to resolve it. But we're also looking not as necessarily at finance and self-worth in terms of assets, property, that kind of thing. We can look at your value as a person. And the full moon kind of exaggerates. So is this a point where you feel the love? You know, you feel intensely that other people value you and support you, and you're receiving their affection, their approval, their applause, maybe. Or is it that you're aware that you are not getting what you deserve? You are not getting full value. You are feeling undervalued. If so, this full moon is about changing that. And we can only change the way people treat us by being in ourselves, confident and strong in ourselves and our self-value. Once we've anchored that and we feel it, then other people will treat us as we deserve. But occasionally we can go through periods where we need to learn that, or we need to learn what it's like to not be treated well, but it passes. So there's life experience in here, as well as something that we may be able to consider about fixing in ourselves our sense of real value. That's the nature of this full moon. You'll also see the red triangle, Mercury opposition Jupiter, square Saturn. These are in the seeking houses, and they're to do with knowledge and experience, things that you're looking for and you wish to find. Well, let's say that you've probably found it, because Saturn is coming into the mix and consolidating, putting its stamp on it. It may be a legal matter here. Maybe there's been a lot of, toing and froing with a legal matter. Now you've got a judgment. That is one way of looking at this. On the other hand, you could look at doing some kind of form filling, hoping to get approval for something, a bureaucratic kind of exercise. And here comes Saturn and says, yeah, okay, you've done it. You've filled the forms out and it's done. Could it also be something to do with learning? Are you on a course, or are you learning a new skill? If so, this might be the time you realize you've got it in the bag. Saturn is helping consolidate it. But it could also be, and it always is with Saturn, Saturn's brand of reality says, look, this is the reality, not what you hope or believe. And maybe you've overreached yourself. Maybe you've gone too far too soon. You've overreached yourself, in which case Saturn is coming in there and pointing this out to you. And that sort of goes along with the idea of the full moon, doesn't it, with Uranus? Maybe the finances aren't balancing too well. We also look at that Mars-Pluto opposition, and really this is going to be only felt if you've got planets and points at 29 degrees of, well, around that point, 29 degrees of Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, and Aries, or 0 to 1 degrees of the fixed signs, Leo, Aquarius, Scorpio, or Taurus. Then you're going to feel Pluto and the Mars-Pluto effect. And in the overview, I talked about confrontation, and confrontation means looking at a situation in its reality, confronting the elephant in the living room. That's confrontation. But confrontation is also conflict. It's about, opposing views. It's about going to the mat for something. It's very unlike Libra. You always want everything to be balanced, and, you want compromise, people pleasing. That's the Libra nature. But this shows that sometimes you have to go to the mat for something, but only if you're going to pick up that, Pluto transit. And remember again what came out of what I was saying earlier, that idea that if you lose or something doesn't go well and you've lost it, it's over, there will be something you're going to take away from it. And it's that something that will grow into something valuable. Okay, Libra. So Scorpio. Here we can see that the sun is in your sign, the moon is in your opposite sign. This is the relationship axis, 1st and 7th house. So we're in the world of relationships, and all relationships. We're not just talking about love affairs and marriage. We're talking about business relationships and partnerships. We're talking about relationships with the family, relationships with friends, colleagues, superiors. Anyone can be superior, you know what I mean, authority figures, even employees. So this idea that a relationship is now in the center of affairs, does it mean you're about to join forces with someone? Has an opportunity suddenly come up? It's a contract in front of you. It's something that you now can bind yourself to, and you didn't think it would happen, but it has. Or is it the reverse? And Uranus has come along and said, you know what, that's over, that's done. That connection, that commitment, that relationship, woo, it's done and dusted. Now, I'm not saying, especially as I talked about family relationships and that kind of relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean in that case it's done, it's over, you'll never speak to a member of the family again. That's kind of different. But it does mean there needs a natural break before you can find some consensus. And I suppose you could say if there's an incident or an upset in a relationship and everybody feels like they never want to see each other again, that after a period of time, you get a handle on it and you can come back together. But the relationship has to be in a new form. That's the important thing. It won't be the same. It can't be the same. Uranus has come along at that time and said, no, this cannot be the way it is right now. It's going to have to be different. So that's what you're playing around with here. Other things, let's look at that Mars-Pluto opposition directly on that life direction axis. Certainly, if you're born at the beginning of your sign, so we're talking about 25th of October, or if you've got planets and points around 0 degrees of Aquarius, Leo, or Taurus, then Pluto is very much in your life. And that process of transformation, which is a beautiful thing, ultimately, when you emerge out of the tunnel, it is, you have changed, core change, and you are a new person. And that's a beautiful thing. But the thing is, to get there, you've gone through the fire. And if you are going through the fire right now and you wish it would stop, we have to remember that there is no such thing as an all bad experience or an all good experience linked to the planets. The principles of the planets are positive and negative. And it is just as possible to have a tremendous experience with Pluto. People become famous or something amazing happens in their lives. And of course, life changes thereafter. And sometimes the way it's changed can be difficult. So we're still working with the same principle, but for different reasons. So what I said in the overview was this idea of my new word. Well, it's not really a new word, but I'm using it more. Is this idea of refashioning. Now, you are a Scorpio, or you've got Scorpio rising, in which case Pluto is your ruling planet. And Pluto is about reinvention, refashioning, every bit as much as it is about a death and a rebirth, because they kind of seem as though they're opposite. Something dies, something's born. But when we look at reinvention, but particularly refashioning, we get the idea that something out of what is gone, something is there, something you can grow into something else. And that's what you need to look for in the situations that you are feeling right now are ending or are difficult, or you are at a loss as to how you're going to manage thereafter. There will be something from it all that is going to be the start of the new thing. And I think that's worth looking at and for. We're also looking at the Mercury-Jupiter opposition squaring Saturn. That's that red triangle there. Now, that's all about survival in many ways. And I'm using that not in inverted commas, because you need a roof over your head to survive. And you also need, the human race needs to survive. And that means producing babies. So we've got these houses that have a lot to do with sex and production and creativity and the future security. These are all bound up in these fixed houses. And you could be right now, I'm sure some Scorpios will be on the receiving end of some great news that they're pregnant, that they're going to have a baby. That's the perfect expression of this. For others, it is something to do with an existing child. So you've got some news here happening, and it's affecting one of your children. It can also be nothing to do with human beings per se, but to do with projects, creative projects. And finance can come into this as well. So something is consolidated, something is done, and you've got a result, whether you're over the moon with that result or it's sort of back to the drawing board. But let's not end on a note where there is failure, because there's so much in this planetary alignment that is pregnant with possibility. Sagittarius. Well, the sun has yet to come into your sign. And of course, it will come into your sign on the 21st of November. But when this full moon is happening, the sun is in the 12th house, the moon is in the 6th house. So this axis is about life purpose, spiritual purpose. They're both interlinked. Some people think, what is my spiritual purpose? How do I become this spiritual being in a material world? How do I do that? And you can't just pull things out of thin air. It isn't about your spiritual framework. It's about what you do in life. And your spiritual purpose becomes alive and you are aware of it through the acts that you do in real life. And the 6th house, where this Moon-Uranus conjunction is taking place, is the house of service. And so often our life purpose is really bound up with what we do for other people, whether we teach them something, whether we help them through something, whether we nurture them, whether they become our responsibility and our duty. When we take responsibility and duty willingly, then we are really, as part of our life purpose, as simple as it sounds, but important as it is. The sun in the 12th house has been going through the 12th house since the end of October. So it's been a period of replenishment, and hopefully you've got rest, relaxation, you've recharged your batteries. This is an important area for really getting the unconscious to reveal its secrets to you, which it does in dreams, which it does in insights and instincts. And if you have enough rest, then your conscious, what's in your unconscious, is going to be more accessible to you. That's the importance of rest. But when we look at this full moon, if we want to look at it on a practical, mundane end, we might be looking at something that's going to make you aware that you can't go burning the candle at both ends, that you've got to look after your health. On the other hand, we could be looking at a breakthrough treatment that is going to help you. So that it's going to be different for every Sagittarian. This is the thing to understand. This is why we talk in generalities here, but the language I'm using will help you relate it to your individual life. But remember, there's something surprising about this full moon experience. This awakening, this understanding is not to be expected. We're also looking at that red triangle, Mercury opposition Jupiter squaring Saturn. I talked about this in the overview and related it to what was going on in America, with probably some developments regarding the Constitution, the economy, the results being in, the sort of legal aspects of things. So that's the general theme of this. But Mercury is in your sign, Jupiter in your opposite sign, Saturn at the base of your chart. In a nutshell, and this won't apply to everybody in this same way, but it will apply to some of you, in discussions with maybe a mortgage company or with the owner of something, then your search for a home or your search for a base is secured. Okay, just look at that very simply. In other cases, it's more about discussions with someone who's very generous, who wants to help you make your ideas, bring your ideas into reality. So we've got a setup here where an idea can come into reality. But, there's a but here. And the but is about if your ideas have exceeded reality, then Saturn is going to show you that that's not a direction to go in, and that cannot be. But that does suggest to you, or should do, that maybe if you try a different way, you'll get there. And in a funny kind of way, the Mars-Pluto opposition is saying that as well. You have to have something in between 29 degrees of a sign, 0 degrees of another one, to really have the Pluto effect. So I'm wasting my breath if it's not going to connect with anything in your chart. But if you don't know whether it is or not, but yet what you feel is torn apart in some way, and that circumstances, fate, has got in the way of something that you thought you were going to have, or it was going to be with you always, that's very Pluto. Pluto comes along, rips something from underneath, undermines you in a big way. And out of that, you have to do something completely different. You have to head in a new direction. Having said that, the real point about all this, the real point about Pluto, is that you take away something from that experience, which is now ended something or whatever it's done. There is something in there that will be the beginnings of the new thing. And that's what you need to look for. And that's what you need to focus. Finding a new thing coming from what is gone or what is lost or what can't go forward, but taking away a part of it, like a seed, planting it and watching it grow into something else. And I'm going to leave you with that very, very positive image. Capricorn. Here we can see the sun in the 11th house of your solar chart and the Moon-Uranus conjunction in the 5th house. We're on the axis of collaboration and creativity. We're at the end of the gestation period. That's what that full moon is saying. So the first thing that comes to mind when you use that word gestation is the idea of a baby. A baby takes 9 months to go from seed to fully developed little human being. So that may indeed be something that is happening to you right now around the time of this full moon. But remember, Uranus is in there. So something surprising is going to happen. Maybe you didn't expect to go into labor, or maybe you were expecting a boy and guess what? You've got a girl, or you thought you were having one and you've got twins. I mean, you can be endless variations on this theme of surprise and at the end of a gestation period. But of course, gestation periods can be to do with projects. They can be to do with relationships and love affairs. And we need to look back 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year to its beginnings. And it's now reached a point where it's ready to be a thing. It's ready to happen. So there's a lot of positivity about this full moon on this particular axis. And I think also with the sun moving through the 11th house, it's sort of reminding you that, you're not alone in the world. And when a group of people get together, great things happen. There's some quote about a village, you know what I mean. Everybody in the village coming together and getting things done. And there's a message here, both in the full moon conjunct Uranus, as well as simply the passage of the sun through the 11th house, that is reminding you that you're not alone, and sometimes coming together with kindred spirits, with people who share an interest in something, a team spirit thing, or a shared goal, whatever it may be, there is strength in that number. On a bigger picture, we could be looking at humanity and all sorts of things to do with what's going on with humanity right now. And your small contribution into that, your awakening into that whole thing. But remember, closure and completion with a full moon is all about the end of a cycle. So something is ending, and it's ending in a strange way, or rather suddenly. That's something to take away from the full moon. When we look at the Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter T-square, that red triangle, we can see here that there are perhaps some things in your life you're not aware of going on right now, but they are going to be part and parcel of something in the future, and it's going to change your outlook in some way. It might not be visible right now. Mercury is in the 12th house, but maybe it's also something that you're beginning to learn consciously, or things happening in your experience, and it's going to change something fundamental in how you view the world, maybe the world in general, or your particular world. And I see it consolidating that, but also because it's Saturn, maybe that realization and that change of outlook and that understanding and whatever it is might initially be a little hard, but it's good ultimately. Mars and Pluto in opposition. Pluto, the last degree, almost the very last minute of Capricorn, never to go back in another 240 years. But if you do have a birthday round about the 18th, 19th, 17th, 18th, 19th of January, then Pluto is very much in your life and has been for the last 18 months and will continue to be that way. And when we think about what Pluto is doing, it's reinventing you. It's, it's changing you at core level. And we don't just go to bed one night and wake up and say, oh, I'm transformed. How great is that? I'm a different person. It doesn't happen like that. It happens over a long period of time, going through many dark journeys, many tunnels, and only coming out of each tunnel, the buildup of all of that amounts to changing you fundamentally. And of course, when you change you change everything. Your whole world changes. So you're in that process. And it's never easy. Even if there are good things happening, they're taking you into places that are challenging. But of course, once you've done it through the other side, then it's a wonderful thing. And as I've said to everybody, every single sign, and also on my overview, let's stick with this word reinvention with Pluto, not reinvention, refashioning with Pluto, because it's so much more positive and it shows us that we can take something away from something we've lost or isn't working anymore or is gone. We've got something, and out of that little nugget, then something else is going to grow. And I love that. I feel that if you can embrace that in a time of turmoil, it makes your turmoil more manageable. So let's come on to Aquarius. And Aquarius, as you'll see here, the first thing you're probably looking at really is that Mars-Pluto opposition across the horizon of your chart. That's if you've got Aquarius rising or you're a Sun Aquarius. It's cutting across the axis of relationships. There are, it's you in the world and it's other people you relate to. So this is quite a long transit, this Pluto-Mars one, and I've talked about it in general in my overview. And the whole Plutonic change, especially if you're born around the 19th, 20th, 21st of January, or you've got planets and points at 0 degrees of Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio, and Leo, then you are going through this slow process of transformation, and it's not over an overnight process. You might make some strides in a short period of time, but it takes 18 months to 2 years to be completed. And believe you, when it's over, you are a different person. You may not necessarily look different, but you are different. You will have psychically been reborn, but the process of that is through some pretty painful and difficult experiences. And if you're going through that now, it's a necessary evil, because what you'll come out with is a change in your life circumstances. Because you have changed, your life will change. And you have to remember that. It's worth going through every painful step. And I have used this word refashion, which I love, because it means you're going to take something that you may have said goodbye to, or may have gone, or may have changed beyond comprehension. You're going to take something from that and it'll grow into something else. And that's an incredibly positive thing. The full moon is on the 10th, 4th axis, another angular set of houses. So this affects, where you're going in life and where you've come from. So it's a pretty important full moon. I think especially if you're born in mid-February, or you have planets and points around 24 degrees of Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. So, sometimes things happen you know, we lose a job or something we'd invested quite a lot of energy and time and skill into, it's gone, doesn't work. And we just feel kind of bereft. But actually, you know, what we have to take on board is the fact that there are natural endings in life. Life is a series of endings and beginnings. That's what we're doing all the time on a monthly basis with full moon, new moon. But the idea is that, contrary to your opinion about something that's now gone, you know, unexpectedly been interrupted, is that diversification is what's next. You need to diversify. So if a job comes to an end, or you have to move home, or something happens within the family, it's all got to be different. It can't be the same. And I could go on, but I'm going to get tangled up in years here. But if you're going through the Uranus opposition or the Uranus square, for instance, and that's, I think, if I remember, 1979 births. Now, I'm not going to do that from memory, but I'll do it on my year ahead planners. It's going to be a kind of double whammy, that what is changing abruptly and suddenly is going to throw you into new territory, but that new territory will become old territory at some point, and that's worth remembering. The red triangle, Mercury opposition Jupiter square Saturn, has something to do with money, and it has something to do with your creative efforts and collaborative efforts as well. Is it that you've done the deal and you've got a company going now, you've got a group of you doing something and it's all decided? Is it a creation of yours that now is going to be solid? It's a real thing. It's not in the imagination. Or is it something to do with an offspring, a child, even a grown-up child, that something now is happening? And either you've got to throw money into that, support a child financially, or you have to support a child going through something. But there are all these ways to look at how these dynamics work in these houses. And money and support, faith and value are all tied up in it. Now, as I said on my overview, this configuration is all about constitutional change. It's about consolidation of the constitution. It's about finance, economy, and the bigger picture. And you can play around with those things as well in terms of your own empire, right? Because that's what's happening here in your solar chart. Pisces. The first thing I'm sure you're looking at is that red triangle, because Saturn is in your sign in the first house, if you've got Pisces rising, and it is tied up in a T-square with Mercury and Jupiter. Such a powerful little T-square, big T-square. Saturn is what brings responsibilities. It brings maturity. Saturn, as it transits Pisces and connects with your sun, will bring gravitas. That's such a beautiful word. It means you're really standing tall. You are a person of substance, which is a good thing. So that's the Saturnian process. And maybe with Mercury and Jupiter caught up in this, you will have a great success, and that's adding responsibilities to you. Something good has happened, something in the way of achievement, recognition, and it's made you bigger. Responsibilities and duties are Saturn. Oh, that's Saturn's business. So you may be taking on more duties, more responsibilities. Now, hopefully, that's something that you'll welcome. But if, like a lot of burdens and responsibilities, we don't like that at all because it's curtailing our freedom, our independence, and a whole lot of other things, then that isn't so good. But the whole trick with this, and I did talk about this on another video, I can't remember when, the idea of the duty of love. I mean, you may not love duty, but duty, you have the duty of love when you're married or you're in a family. Saturn is part of the duty of love. And if we can accept that and bear it as a duty of love, it becomes something noble. And that may be something you need to get your head around in terms of this configuration. The full moon we're looking at is on the 3rd, 9th axis. So we're in the area of seeking, the seeking houses, 9th, 3rd, 12th, and 6th. We're always looking for something. We want to make discoveries. We want to understand things. We also want to somehow make our life bigger, particularly with the 9th house, which is often about overseas, far horizons in terms of travel and distant places. Whereas with the 3rd house, it's a little bit more localized, but we're still seeking to expand our boundaries, find something, seeking to find. So this may be a journey in consciousness, it may be a journey in knowledge and experience. And something about it is unusual because Uranus is in there. Is it that you didn't expect this journey to take you where you've ended up? Quite literally, journey of miles, you didn't expect to end up here or the journey to be like that. Or if you're studying something or experiencing something, you had no idea that it was going to take you where it has, you know. So there's a lot to be gained from this full moon and its conjunction to Uranus in the sense that, yes, it's different, it's unusual, but it's going to add to your quality of experience. It's going to add to your knowledge. It's going to augment your life. It's not going to detract from it. But that isn't necessarily the way you'll feel about it at the time, because Uranus often is abrupt and something is lost, taken away. And that can be a very discombobulated kind of experience. But in time, you will see that good things have come out of that experience. Maybe indeed, just on a very mundane level, you need to be a little more careful on the full moon itself of journeys. Don't put your foot down if you're driving a car. Don't leave it too late to get to the airport. Make sure you've got your phone and all the things you may need if you need to contact people, because Uranus can be very technological as well. That's just something to bear in mind around the time of the full moon. And then we come to that Mars-Pluto opposition. It's not going to have much of an impact in your life unless you've got something around 0 degrees of Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. But if you are in a situation which you feel is not of your making, something's happened, it's got nothing to do with you, and it's not very nice, and it's really turned your life upside down. If that's happening to you, 1,000 to 1, Pluto is somewhere in your chart. And when we put Mars with Pluto, it's all about confronting the situation for what it is. And I use that in when I was talking about it in the overview, confronting the elephant in the living room, but it can also be confrontation in the sense of conflict. And, nobody wants conflict, but sometimes, it has to happen. And out of conflict ultimately comes peace. It's something to remember. But as I have said to everybody, this idea of Pluto, this word refashioning, is terribly important because it means the stuff you're going through that seems to be out of your control, nothing to do with you. You just got landed with this. If you can take away something, the part that's lost, the part you haven't got anymore, you can take something from that and refashion it into something else. That's the whole purpose of the Plutonic exercise, because you will grow something out of something that once was. And of course, you will grow in the process. Finally, my last sign, Aries. And how unusual is it for Aries to be last? First sign of the zodiac, a pioneer, and here you are, rounding everybody up. And we look at this full moon, which is cutting across the 2nd and 8th axis. So we're in the area of self-worth and receivership, where we receive. So it has a lot to do with money for a lot of Arians. whether it means, and especially as we've got Uranus conjunct the moon, have you suddenly got money? How did you get money? What, did you win the lottery? Or did you get an inheritance? Or has somebody just suddenly paid you for your services? There's a surprise edge to it. But of course, as much as we can say how beneficial a surprise aspect to finances may be, when we think about a full moon, which is closure and completion and endings, it may be that something's happened financially and that this now demands a lot of kind of changes and a lot of effort to right the balance here. There could be a bit of a financial crisis for some Arians, and it really needs a whole new way of looking at finances. But of course, finances aren't only to do with self-worth. Self-worth is about what we feel about ourselves, and certainly what we feel when other people view us. Do we feel valued by other people? And that's definitely in this full moon event. It may be that we feel that someone hasn't recognized our value and is undervaluing us and undermining us, in which case the balance has to be righted. But of course, unless we really feel that we are full of value, yes, we have that. We know our value. We're not going to get very far. And another aspect of this full moon is the understanding that what is it about us that we feel is valuable? What do we offer that we love to offer and we feel is an essential part of us that we give? And that, you know, in the sense of that being of so much value of ourselves, other people recognize it too. And that is the way around it, of course, is the way of anchoring our sense of self-worth and knowing it and feeling it and living it, and the dramatic change that brings in how other people treat us. So this may be the lesson of this full moon, every bit as much as you might be grappling around to pay for a bill, or maybe coming to the end of a contract. Maybe your mortgage is finished. So we look too at that red triangle with Mercury opposition Jupiter square Saturn. Saturn, of course, in Pisces in the 12th house, the preceding sign. It will come briefly into Aries next year. So a lot of what is going on now is tying up loose ends. There's a lot of distillation going on. You're figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what's over and done with, what could be part of the future. And because this area of the chart, the 12th house, is often very unconscious, we may have absolutely no idea what great things are developing. Look at that Mercury-Jupiter opposition. That's showing you great things. It's showing you the ability of your imagination is the extent of what you can achieve. In other words, think big, you will grow big, and the results will be big. Of course, it has to be thought about and made real, but there is a sense of the big ideas you've got at the moment, the big hopes, the big steps you're taking, even though they may not bring a result right now, that they are going to be part of your future. And I really, really like that. The downside is that you've taken on too much, you are doing too much, and you are now going to realize the result of overreaching, over pushing, all of that. And your health is what's going to be where it's going to be shown. So we're looking at this and seeing all sorts of possibilities here. And what I would like to say really about this is that when I talked about what was going on with the Constitution, the idea that in America, this T-square, Jupiter square Saturn, Saturn square Mercury, has a lot to do with legal matters, legality, the Constitution, the economy. So we can take some of that into our own lives as well, especially as Aries, you've got that full moon on your financial axis, so to speak, that there's something there about, you know, building up some kind of template, some kind of structure with which you can grow strong and sure. That's another aspect of that. I was going to say red triangle, but you know what I mean. Finally, the Mars-Pluto opposition. You've had Pluto running through your 10th solar house, running. Pluto doesn't run, does it? It moves very, very, very slowly through the 10th house of career, life direction, your material world. So at some point, Pluto would definitely have squared your sun, maybe other planets too, maybe connected with all sorts of planetary bodies. And it's during that time that you realize you're up against it. And particularly now, with this prevailing Mars-Pluto opposition, which is going to be around for weeks on end, and we can see this playing out in the world with all the conflicts we've got going and all the fears that those conflicts are raising, that there is this happening in your own life if you've got that Mars-Pluto aspect anywhere on your personal planets or on your angles of your chart. So rather than think, I must get my warrior gear on and I must fight the good fight like Joan of Arc, I think certainly because the Mars-Pluto aspect is going to go on for a long time, what you need most of all is a strategy. Now, I'm not saying Aries aren't good with strategy. I'm an Aries myself, and obviously I create some strategies. But, I'm definitely shoot from the hip. Let's get in there. Let's do it. Very Aries. But over the years, I have learned the benefits of strategies. And it's always a good thing to have a strategy before you go into battle. And this is what you need to remind yourself of all the time. Don't go in blindly. Don't go in instinctively and emotionally. Know your enemy. Whether your enemy is a body of work or some kind of bureaucratic thing, it doesn't have to be a person. Whatever the battle, go prepared. And I think that's what that Mars-Pluto opposition is about in your case. Although if it's a long transit of Pluto to something in your chart, then that process of renewal, of going through tunnel after tunnel until you come out into the light, a new person, because of everything you've been through, then this is going to be a hard part of that journey. But remember that word refashioning that I've gone on about with every sign of the zodiac and in my overview. You're going to be able to take something from this experience that is going to grow into something beautiful as you go forward in life. So, Aries, that is the end of my interpretation of what's going on in your life right now. And it's also the end of all 12 signs, quite a marathon. So I'm going to kind of keep my conclusion a little short. But a lot of the things that I've been saying, sign by sign, particularly relating to Pluto, are something that I think is current. Remember, I talked about in the overview the outer planets and their relationship with the development of nuclear power and the whole of the nuclear age being the post-Saturnian age, if you like. I've explained all that. And of course, we've got this prevailing Mars-Pluto opposition. And now we're going to get a full moon conjunct Uranus. So we're really playing on those kind of themes. And I thought about it again because it keeps coming up in my work and in my conversations, whether they're directly with people in consultation or whether it's just generally. This idea that, although I'm not saying this isn't true because I wouldn't, and this idea of this big shift that's happening at the moment, some people are labeling it this idea of the rise of the feminine. This rise of the people versus the government. I know some people call it top down being reversed and it's now bottom up. Well, whether that is a true shift or not, the important thing is that it's about us. And I think that our consciousness changes as a result of the particularly difficult experiences we have in life. I mean, good experiences are just a joy, aren't they? We don't have to think about them, they're so good. But the difficult ones, the ones that challenge us, and particularly the ones that overwhelm us, then that takes grit, it takes awareness, it takes all sorts of aspects of ourselves, the resources we have to get through it. That does change our consciousness. And of course, every bit as much as each one of us goes through something that challenges us. And as we go through that Plutonic experience, that through the Pluto tunnel, or many tunnels that we'll go through, we come through reborn. We are a different entity when we come out the other side of it, a different consciousness. And that contributes to the whole of humanity. But it's a journey we make ourselves. And it isn't just appreciating energy changes or even observing it happening. And it's easy to get caught up in this because we see it sometimes. But I think, again, it's our responsibility. It's our Saturnian world, if you like, that means the journey we make through this is what contributes to the shift. It's not coming down to us. It's we're bringing it out. Okay, I think that's me done, and I have nothing else to say except I look forward to seeing you on my next video next time. Bye for now.